2 days later, Shelley called and asked to come over for a bit. I agreed, opening the door when she knocked. With a heavy heart, she handed me some test results. They showed positive for 2 infections. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, but I couldn't let her see it. This put me in a better position for a postnuptial agreement. The weight of what was happening settled heavily on my chest. "Oh, Shelley," was all I could muster, my voice filled with sadness. She reached out, desperation in her eyes, but I took a step back. "Not until you're healthy," I said firmly. With tears brimming in her eyes, she nodded and hurried out the front door, leaving me with a mix of relief and heartache. The next time I saw her, she came by to show me her clean health check. It was clear that this situation had deeply affected her. She was less insistent about us getting back together. Instead, she suggested we spend some time at the lake with friends to change the scenery and ease our conversations. I agreed, as I had things I wanted to discuss, but I felt the tension lingering between us. And so we found ourselves at the lake, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and splashing water. But it didn't take long for the atmosphere to sour. I turned to Shelley's sister, who had been dominating the conversation, and said, "Please be quiet. The more you talk like that, the less I want to be part of this family. Shelley, tell her to stop talking, or I won't say a word to you until Christmas." At that, Shelley walked over to her sister, pointed firmly, and said, "Stop it. You're only making things worse." As the noise settled down, I stood up and declared, "I'm going for a swim to cool off." I stripped off my t-shirt, and I heard Shelley gasp. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, her eyes widening in shock. There on the left side of my chest was a large tattoo of a bright red heart. The top of the heart read "My one true love." Shelley thought I had done it for her, but inside the heart were the letters "N." I watched as she turned away, clearly upset. She came closer, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the tattoo. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered. "I could ask you the same, Shelley," I replied, my voice rising. "How could you treat me like this? Look at this tattoo. It's a constant reminder of what I've lost. I can picture you with someone else, just like you can picture me with someone else. Which situation hurts more? Do you understand my pain now?" What was meant to be a calm talk spiraled into a confrontation. We began marriage counseling, hoping to resolve our issues, but we just kept having the same discussions that had plagued us for weeks. There was still no resolution to our main issue. Now that Shelley felt better, she wanted to return home. I told her I was okay with that, but we needed a postnuptial agreement to clarify our expectations. I met with my lawyer to share my thoughts. In exchange for not filing for divorce due to Shelley's past actions, she agrees to the following. She will never mention Lance Belton or any experiences she had with him or others, especially not in a way that compares me to him. Shelley will have no written, spoken, or electronic communication with Belton. I agree to never call Shelley disrespectful names related to her past with Belton. We will both genuinely work to fix our relationship after Shelley's mistake. Shelley will be tested for HIV/AIDS every 3 months for 9 months. If either of us engages in infidelity, we forfeit all rights to our house, shared money, custody of our children, and any support payments. Shelley agrees to always tell the truth and never lie to me. My lawyer looked at me, clearly embarrassed by the necessity of the agreement. If Shelley had better legal representation, she could have rejected this, he warned. I thought she would be ready to agree to everything I listed. He improved the agreement, which earned me an additional $11,000. When I presented it to Shelley, she signed it without hesitation. I could have added a rule about her not spending time with certain friends, but I chose not to. I wanted to give her a chance to prove herself, and if she slipped up, I could end things for good without her turning our sons against me. When I helped her move her things back into the house, I could see a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Our home was cozy but small, with only 3 bedrooms. The boys each had their own room, and figuring out where Shelley would sleep was a challenge. We wanted to appear united for the boys, but I dreaded the thought of sharing close quarters with her at night. I reminded myself to focus on my long-term goal of getting her out of my life, rather than the temporary discomfort of our current situation. I hoped the tattoo on my chest would make her think twice about getting too close to me again. On Friday nights, I would go to Clear Creek and return on Monday mornings, which helped reduce the time I spent with her to 4 days each week. I had to get through 4 more nights. Shelley tried hard to reconnect, but I kept saying, "Not yet. Let's take it slow, we need time to heal." I wasn't being entirely honest with myself, as I was still struggling with my feelings. One morning, while delivering a part for a plane being fixed at the airfield, I saw Lance's plane parked there. I walked over and chatted with some friends in the hangar, who confirmed it was indeed Lance's plane and that he was inside. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about how to make things tough for him. I knew I couldn't confront him directly, he was much bigger and stronger than I was. I contemplated various ways to complicate his life, but I didn't want to end up in jail and leave my friends behind. Still unsure of what to do, I returned to the hangar around 9 p.m. to see if I could find a way to confront him. I was surprised to see lights on inside his cabin, but the door was closed. I found a ladder and moved it close enough to peek inside. What I saw was alarming, and I knew I had to take action. I recorded a short video of what I observed and rushed to the police station. They took my report seriously and quickly obtained a judge's approval for a search warrant. I led them to the plane and showed them how to approach without being noticed. Once the police were ready, I stepped back, not wanting Lance to think I was involved. The police approached him from different angles, and 2 officers used the ladder to record what was on his computer before they opened the cockpit door. Lance put up a struggle, but after a couple of jolts from a taser, he was subdued. They took him away, and I felt a mix of relief and anxiety wash over me. It was only the beginning of a long, complicated journey ahead. The news hit hard. Lance was arrested at his computer, and the details quickly made their way across every news outlet. I knew Shelley had seen it, the tension hung thick in the air, but neither of us mentioned it directly. I was still grappling with my own feelings about the situation. She did ask about my late night near his plane, and I simply shrugged, not wanting to delve into it. "I hope Lance suffers for what he did," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of anger and relief. I couldn't help but share that sentiment. With all his money and his own plane, he managed to stay locked up without bail. People like him don't have many friends in prison, and I found a grim satisfaction in that fact. But as the dust settled from that ordeal, the influence of Shelley's friends and my choice to end our relationship led her to stray once more. This time, she fell for a bartender who took advantage of her when she was drunk. A few others were around, and somehow, a video of the incident made its way into circulation. Soon, she was back at the clinic, and my lawyer had been right about her. I always knew she would cheat again, and now I had the upper hand. When I showed Shelley the video, her expression shifted from shock to despair as she gasped and sank into a chair. I didn't need to say much, the evidence spoke volumes. "Call your friends and have them help you get your things out of my house," I told her flatly. The next day, 3 of her friends arrived to help her move. I insisted on being there, wary of how they might handle my belongings. One of the women shot me a disapproving look. "You must be quite unkind to put someone who cares for you out like this," she said, her tone sharp. I couldn't help but laugh at her naivety. She chose to be with someone else, despite promising not to. She knew the rules, and now she's facing the consequences. "At the airport, you told me to get over it. This is how I'm moving on," I replied, a sense of finality in my voice. The frustration on her face told me she understood my position, even if she didn't agree with it. Later, we met at my lawyer's office to sign the divorce papers and finalize other documents. Shelley brought her own lawyer to challenge everything we had already agreed on. He was loud and obnoxious, proclaiming, "This agreement is ridiculous." His rant was nothing more than the ramblings of a frustrated man. It meant nothing to me. My lawyer turned to me and said, you're right. This deal is difficult for both sides. It's unpleasant and hard to accept, but no matter how challenging it is, it's still valid. This is what we do every day, take something unappealing and make it acceptable. So let's just finish this. As I left the meeting, I could see Shelley was emotional in the conference room. My home, my kids, my marriage. Please don't take everything from me. I'll have nothing left. I'm asking you, please. Her pleas rang in my ears, but deep down, I hoped it would be the last thing I ever heard from her. In the days that followed, Carter and Tyler approached me about moving to Clear Creek for good. I didn't mind at all, but I needed to talk it over with Pat and Bill first. With Shelley out of my life, I took the boys to Clear Creek that Friday night. I filled Pat and Bill in on everything, including the fact that we were now divorced. They were disappointed in Shelley, but relieved that their 3 boys were okay, because, after all, we were now their 3 boys. As we drove through the golden fields, Bill and I discussed the possibility of moving into the bunkhouse and me working at Clear Creek. He smiled knowingly and said, "Funny you mention that. Pat and I were just discussing it and wanted to talk with you about it. We would love to have you and the boys stay on the ranch." We shook hands, sealing our agreement as we continued our conversation. The next afternoon, I was elbow-deep in grease from working in the shop when Pat stopped by to check on me. I was holding my shirt under the water to clean it and cool off when she walked in. She paused, looked at me, and stepped closer. I could feel the warmth of her presence as she touched my tattoo, a symbol of love and devotion. "I'm so fortunate to have someone who cares for me so deeply," she said, embracing me warmly despite my sweaty condition. I replied, "Yeah, I really cared for her, and I miss her a lot." Pat turned and walked back to the house, wiping her eyes with a tissue, leaving me with a mix of emotions I hadn't expected to feel. After school, we sold the house in Wichita and moved into the bunkhouse. Each of the boys got their own room, and we transformed a 3rd room into a TV and family area. We didn't need a kitchen since Pat did all the cooking, and she was more than happy to feed us. While Shelley stayed in touch with the boys through emails and phone calls, I cut off all contact with her. Carter was old enough to drive with a special farm license, and it was surprising how many errands he found to run around the farm. Both boys loved spending time with the local kids, and I often heard the name Amber Reynolds pop up in conversations about where Carter was and who he was hanging out with. Curious, I asked him, "Have you met her parents?" "Yeah, she's one of my teachers, and her dad was a veterinarian, but he passed away 2 years ago. Her mom is really nice," Carter replied, sharing more information than I anticipated. As summer rolled on, the local ranchers held their annual barbecue, and by then, I had met most of them. I felt comfortable at the party, mingling with familiar faces. While I was grabbing drinks, I noticed a woman who reminded me a bit of Anne. Uncertain if it really was her, I decided to approach. But when she turned and smiled at me, I realized she was Hispanic and definitely not Anne. Just then, someone touched her arm, and she turned to speak to them, leaving me to quietly retreat, relieved I hadn't embarrassed myself. Later, Carter and Amber invited me over to meet her mother, Emily. I gladly accepted, intrigued by the chance to connect. It turned out that the Hispanic woman I'd seen earlier was indeed Amber's mother. Up close, she was beautiful, with features that faintly resembled Anne's. We clicked instantly and continued chatting even after the kids left us. We shared a few dances together, and the lightheartedness of the evening enveloped us. As we were leaving the dance area, I spotted Pat walking toward us, arm in arm with another woman, both smiling widely. I turned to Emily and asked, "I wonder what Pat wants to talk to me about?" Emily smiled knowingly and replied, "How do you know Pat?" "She's my mother-in-law, and I live in their guest house with my boys." The unexpected connection added another layer to my life, and I couldn't help but feel that perhaps this new chapter was beginning to unfold in ways I had never anticipated. "Then you must be him," Emily exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "Him? What do you mean?" I asked, thoroughly confused. The him who married Anne. I was Anne's maid of honor at your wedding. The woman with Aunt Pat is my mom, Mary Hernandez. Pat and Mary are sisters. Oh wow. Is that why your son is named Carter? I asked, piecing it all together. Emily called out, Mom. Mom. It's him. Mother, it's Anne's husband. I finally found him. Turning to me, Emily said, Let me see it. See what? I asked, puzzled. The tattoo. The love tattoo for Anne. Please show it to me. I lifted my shirt slightly, exposing the tattoo that had been a tribute to my late wife. When she placed her hand on it, I felt an unexpected spark between us. We locked eyes, and in that moment, it was clear we had forged a special bond. Pat smiled knowingly. Well, I see you two have found each other. We hoped you would connect naturally so you wouldn't think we set this up. Suddenly, I noticed we were holding hands, and Pat teased, You and Anne were alike, you can't help but reach out to this man. We all burst into laughter at her remark. I wasn't trying to replace Anne, and Emily wasn't looking for a duplicate of her late husband. We genuinely cared for each other for who we were, not for who we had lost. The following July, Emily and I rode horses to her favorite spot to watch the annual Perseid meteor shower. As we sat on a blanket, wrapped in each other's warmth, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small box. Emily, my love for you is so deep that I want to be with you every single day. Will you marry me? Oh, Bobby. I really want to marry you. You are the best person for me in the whole world, she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. We shared a tender moment, holding each other tightly, knowing that our future together would be something truly special. Suddenly, she shouted, Look! I saw it. I turned just in time to see two stars winking through the clouds, making a shape that resembled a big smile. That fall, Emily and I tied the knot. I moved into her house, and for the first time in nearly 20 years, the bunkhouse was empty. That changed when Carter finished his degree in animal science and moved in, enjoying the newfound space, especially when his girlfriend, Amber, came to visit. A year later, Carter and Amber blended the Smith and Carter families, and as they started having kids, they moved into Pat and Bill's house when Pat and Bill relocated to an assisted living center in town. Bill still drives out to Clear Creek every day to help with the ranch, a testament to his love for the land and the work he had devoted his life to. Tyler visited the ranch during wheat harvest, pheasant hunting, and on holidays. He lived in Kansas City with his girlfriend, and they both had steady jobs. Pat and Bill helped their two grandsons pay for college, ensuring a bright future for them. The boys visited their mother for holidays and her birthday. She was now married to a retired postal worker, and the boys thought she seemed happy. Meanwhile, Lance Belton admitted guilt instead of going to trial, not wanting any more scrutiny into his actions. He received a 12-year sentence in a place he definitely didn't like. As time went on, Pat and Bill transferred their shares of Clear Creek Ranch to Bobby, Carter, and Tyler, giving each of them a stake in the family legacy. Clear Creek continued to pay Bill a consultant fee that met all his needs at the assisted living center. Emily and I were very much in love, cherishing how our lives had turned out. We faced pain and sorrow but found a way to put it behind us. My tattoo didn't deter Emily from wanting to be close to me, even though it bore the name of her cousin. It didn't bother her at all. In fact, she happily shared with her friends that despite the circumstances, she truly enjoyed being with me. As the story unfolded, I realized how much we had both grown. Our pasts didn't define us, instead, they shaped us into the people we were now, stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future together. To all the listeners of Temptress Cheating Tales, if you enjoyed hearing this story and want to stay updated on our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.